If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what is the most unexplained, supernatural, or paranormal event you've ever witnessed? Was spending the night at a friend's house as a kid, around 12 to 13. Parents weren't home, so we decided to go out, do some ding-dong ditching, get into some young angsty debauchery. We get home, and it's around 1 or 2 in the morning. Cue a ringing of the doorbell. Naturally we think it's the cops or a pissed-off neighbor. My friend had a small window that looked out onto the front porch that you couldn't really see into from outside, so we took a peek at who was calling at such a late hour. Standing at the door was an old woman in a dress and a young boy in a weird newsy outfit. Both were dressed extremely out of period, as this was the 90s, and my friend had never seen either in the neighborhood before. We duck because we're a bit freaked, look again no less than 10 seconds later and they're both gone. Nobody on the street walking away, no cars driving away, they were just gone without a trace. We did not sleep well. Well, Monday I started to worry about my grandpa. The moment of worry passed, and I went about my day. Later on I posted an article about automated lawn mowers, saying that my grandpa would love this, since taking care of his yard was his hobby. Literally right after I hit share, my dad calls me. We all know this feeling. It's that drop in your stomach when you know something terrible has happened, or it's about to. The feeling that your world has changed and there's nothing you can do. Anyways, he tells me that my grandpa was rushed to the hospital with a bladder infection followed by several heart attacks, but he's still alive. I didn't think anything about worrying earlier, at least until I woke up the next morning. My dream that night was what made it click in my head, I guess. In the dream I was sitting in my grandpa's shed watching something, and he sits down next to me. Without any pretense he starts talking. The next few weeks are gonna be hard, and they will test you. Don't worry about me, in a few hours I won't have any use for it. We ended up spending what seemed like hours talking about a lot of personal things I honestly didn't know or didn't remember about my grandpa. Most of which my dad and his brother have confirmed to be true, although a little exaggerated apparently. Grandpa didn't die until around noon on Tuesday, pretty much just a few hours, 3-hour time difference, after my dream. I'm not religious, nor will I be, but for fuck's sake, what the fuck? I know the subconscious mind can do things like this, but some of the details he told me about his life are things I wasn't there for, or even alive for. When I was around 6 or 7 we had a cat that had kittens. We knew it had kittens because it was pregnant and then it wasn't anymore. The problem was that we had no idea where the kittens were. I was wondering about it and looked right at the cat and sort of thought in my mind, where are your kittens? But without using words, if that makes any sense. Immediately the location came into my mind. It was through some broken boards just above our porch that our cat could jump into from pillars on the side of the porch. I knew that they were there. I walked straight over there, climbed onto the stone pillar and looked through the hole in the boards. The kittens were right there. I've never had a similar experience again in my life. I have a very strong danger sense that's been proven terrifyingly correct both times I've had it. The first was when I was in high school training for cross country. I would usually run by this lake near my house, but one day I was close and got a very strong no feeling. It was like fighting against a very strong animal instinct to go any closer. I turned right around and went back to my house. When my mom commented on how short my run was, I explained to her what happened and she seemed alarmed, wondering if I'd had some sort of panic attack. A few days later, police found a body in the lake. The more recent example was when I was riding the DC Metro with my partner sometime last year. We were on the Orange Line, and needed to get off at a stop that was also on the Silver Line. We're on the train when all of a sudden I get this very strong sense again. I told my partner about it, and though at first he was skeptical, he trusted me and we switched lines. Later we found out there was a stabbing on the Orange Line that same night. When I was young, probably around 8 to 10, I caught chickenpox. I woke up in the middle of the night one night and called for my mom, because little kids can't do shit for themselves when they're sick. A woman came into my bedroom and sat on my bed and stroked my hair until I fell asleep. For whatever reason, I thought it was my grandmother, but she was dressed funny. When I woke up the next morning, I went downstairs for breakfast, and asked where my grandma was, and, naturally, my mom told me that she was at her house, like she always was. I told my mom she'd been in my room the night before, and my mom laughed and said that I'd just been dreaming. However, my aunt, who tended to believe that sort of thing more, was babysitting me that day. The upside to chicken pox meant there was no school for me, and I told her the story. She asked me to describe the weird outfit, and it was a nurse's outfit from the 50s/early 60s. My family knew the previous owners of the house. The wife was a nurse in the 50s and had died a few months previously. Can I say with 100% certainty that I had an encounter with a spirit? No. But it's certainly a spooky coincidence. Not me, but my stepfather's best friend, call him Jim, has supposedly been experiencing paranormal activity since he was a teenager. He's a court reporter, stepdad was a speechwriter, very skeptical and stoic guys. There were countless stories. They got on an elevator full of people in downtown Atlanta, stopped at a floor that was all kinds of wrong, 1940s decor, abandoned, dusty, then the elevator went back down and opened on the opposite side of the building. Jim's dog died. A week later the stereo turned on by itself and started playing a song Jim loved to play for his pet. No CD inside. It had snowed the night before and there were paw prints in the backyard leading to the house, but none near the gate. He frequently finds giant piles of coins under his pillow. He lived in London for a time, thinking he'd escaped the spirit, which had begun to scratch him hard on his arms and legs. After 6 months he found a little pile of pennies in his bed, even though he hadn't been carrying American coinage. I personally witnessed one strange event while Jim was around. Was walking down the stairs and felt something whip past my head and heard it hit the wall. Looked down and saw a quarter dated 1948. I thought my sister was messing with me, but she was down at the lake with everyone else. When I was about 17, I was at my friend's apartment building, which his parents owned. We had an apartment to hang out in on the top floor and used to go to the roof to smoke. One night, we were about to go up, but I had to pee, so I told him I'd meet him up there. After I was done, I went up the stairs to the attic portion that was connected to the roof. There were no lights, so we always used our phones to guide us. It was an old building and the attic was creepy and cluttered all the time. As I made my way to the roof door, I saw a shadow pass by me. I followed the direction it went thinking it was my friend. I kept saying that I knew it was him and to stop playing around. It passed me a few more times, when I heard my friend's voice from downstairs. He got a call from his girlfriend and was in another room talking to her the whole time. I have no idea what that shadow figure was, but it really freaked me out. I told my friend what happened and that I did not want to go back up there. A couple things for people to consider that have been mentioned when I've told this story before. It was not my own shadow since the only light up there was coming from my phone, which I held in front of me. It also wasn't someone that just broke in, because that door locks from the outside, and the next day my friend went to check when it was daytime and there was no one there. You should know that I consider myself to be a very rational person. I'm not superstitious, and I don't believe in psychic powers or the supernatural. My best friend, Travis, and I used to play guitars together almost every day. That's not important now, but it will be later. One day we decided to go to the beach with our girlfriends and take some mushrooms. After a little while, when the mushrooms were kicking in, Travis said that he wanted to wander off alone, so I stayed with our girlfriends. We all had a great time. As the sun began to set, Travis' girlfriend asked me, "Where's Travis?" None of us knew where he was, but I could hear him playing the guitar, so I suggested that we just follow the sound of the music until we got to him. The girls told me that I must have really good hearing, because they couldn't hear anything. I said, "Well, I can definitely hear it, so just follow me." Now here's the strange part. I followed the sound for several minutes, into the forest, and went directly to him, but when we reached him, he did not have a guitar, and I realized that we had left our guitars at home. I still have no idea how that happened. So much paranormal shit happened to me when I was a kid. One that has always stuck was when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Back then I used to randomly wake up in the middle of the night really often for no known reason. I was still sleeping in my parents' bed at the time, so I would just lay in bed and look around. I swear, every time I'd look at the doorway to the living room, I would see 2 really tall figures standing there. They looked like the old farm couple in that one painting. Except they had hollow eyes and they were thinner. They never really didn't do anything but stare back at me at first. One night was especially weird. I woke up as usual and saw them standing there in front of the doorway again. Only this time something felt a bit more off than usual. The ceiling fan was on high and the blades were going so fast that the entire fixture was moving back and forth. I look back at the figures and they have some really dark, creepy grins on their faces. I got scared and buried myself in the blankets, hoping they'd go away. Then all I heard was the ceiling fan spinning even faster, somehow. The beads at the end of the switches were tapping against the glass light cover furiously. I peeked up out of my covers and the 2 figures were right next to the bed, standing right over me with their ugly smiles. I screamed bloody murder and the glass cover on the light came off and shattered on the ground. My dad jumped out of bed immediately and turned on the light to see what happened, but the two figures were gone already. I was crying hysterically and took my mom a long time to calm me down. So much other stuff went on while I lived there. That was the worst house I ever lived in. I was in a room that lost its color, and this was witnessed with another person. I always see these and love reading them, so I will contribute my unexplained experience. First off, I have quite a few. I'm a nurse who works night shift with a mostly geriatric population. One night it was just me and my younger nursing assistant. She wanted to look something up on the computer, so she was sitting beside me at the desk. Suddenly I noticed a paper on the counter with colored lettering looked dim. As in, the color wasn't strong. Like there was a haze in the air. I looked across the room and there was a sign, it's still hanging there as of today, that said pressure points in red, and again, the colors were muted. It was like my eyes were losing the ability to see color. There was a general grayness filling the space, not like a shape, just everything appeared muted and the colors were dim. I started to quietly freak out and worry that I had a brain tumor or multiple sclerosis. A multiple sclerosis symptom can be losing the ability to see color. I didn't say anything though because, well, I didn't want her to think I was crazy. Suddenly Tara, the nursing assistant, looked up and out to the hallway and said, "Do you notice that the hallway looks gray?" I was immediately relieved because that meant I wasn't suffering from some mysterious disorder, because she saw the grayness too. We watched this grayness that seemed to saturate not only the hallway but our entire surroundings. It then seemed to begin to concentrate in the hallway and near the ceiling, and we watched as it slowly disappeared. It moved to the left and then just left. Afterward it was like someone turned on the lights and the colors were back to full saturation. Surprisingly, we didn't really freak out, but that's probably because as healthcare workers we are just conditioned not to. To this day I have zero explanation for what this was, and nothing like this has ever happened since then, nor have I ever heard of anyone experiencing something like this. I have heard of people seeing clouds or fog, but this wasn't like that. This was like being inside a fog that filled the entirety of our space. I have had other strange happenings, but nothing this odd. The fact that my nursing assistant saw it reinforces the experience. I had no plans to say anything about it because, like I said, I thought I was being anxious and a hypochondriac, but obviously I wasn't. I would love to hear if anyone else has ever had something like this happen. My family owns a cottage on a lake. This lake had a cottage on it 80 years ago where 3 teenage girls died when it burned down. My grandmother was at her cottage at the time and heard the screams from across the lake. Every year around the date, early August I believe, she could still hear the screams. Whatever that was, just a form of PTSD, right? Wrong. My father, who wasn't even born when the fire happened, started hearing the screams when he was young. Out of 4 kids he was the only one to hear them. And when I was younger I started hearing them. The screams echo across the lake, but only my dad and I seem to hear them. It's terrifying. After confronting my dad about this and him telling me about everything, the fire, my grandmother, etc., he said to never go near the old fireplace, still standing after so long, around the date, because the closer you get the louder the screams. Now I try to avoid our cottage around early August. Side note, my dad has a theory as to why we are the only ones that can hear the screams. My grandmother was supposed to stay the night and would have died, but it doesn't explain why my dad and I are the only ones that can hear it. So almost 3 years ago, I was on holiday with my family and staying at my childhood home. That place has always been creepy, but nothing really scary had happened to me. My older brother was usually the victim. This night I wake up at around 2 or 3 a.m. and needing to pee. I was very comfortable cuddling my though, so I tried to just ignore it and fall back asleep. Like half an hour goes by, and I don't feel sleepy anymore and seriously need the bathroom. So I sit up and peek around to find my slippers, and I almost pissed myself when I saw this weird ass person lying in fetal position on the fucking floor. Like, it was black, way darker than normal black, even though it was under this rectangle of light that came from the hallway. Then I proceeded to cry. I felt so scared all of a sudden, and it woke my up, who then had to console me until daylight. The next day there was nothing on the floor, but I was still extremely creeped out. Since then I have only slept there once, and only with the lights on. It's been over 2 years since I last stepped a foot in my childhood bedroom, and I'm not planning on doing so anytime soon. That's just one, but there's so many things happen there I don't like to spend much time there anymore. First, a little backstory to explain. I am Muslim. My huge family tree is Muslim. One of our beliefs, there are spirits called jinn. They don't inhabit the living world, but they visit. They are unseen spirits. Spooky, right? Anyway. Sometimes kids can see/speak to them. Now, the story. I was visiting my cousins, on my aunt's side. They have two 18-year-old boys and a 7-year-old boy. We had just come back from dinner. The little boy, we'll call him John, walked in first after his mom unlocked the house door. He turned and waved at a plant in a dark sitting room. We thought nothing of it. Later on, his siblings went into the living room to watch TV while he stayed in the sitting room. I left, but watched him from behind a door. He turns and starts talking to the plant. It's a full convo with replies and body language. Getting creeped out, I tell one of his older brothers. He tells me, and I quote, "Yeah, he does that sometimes." I woke up late at night to use the bathroom a couple times and saw him talking to the plant. Once, I walked in and asked him who he was talking to. He said a friend. When I told him to go to sleep, he turned to the plant and said bye. "I'll see you tomorrow." Me and his brother were creeped out. Then, a thought arose. What if he was talking to the plant to help it grow? I said. His brother replied once, he brought some candy and put it on the couch near the plant. He told me it was for his friend who sits by the plant. Me and his brother decide to move the plant for one night. We don't tell him. He wasn't even home. We find him by the couch later. We put down a recorder to see what he says to his friend. Here's what John says. "Hello. I'm good, you? Why? Who moved it? But why would they? I'm sorry. I'll try to get it back for you. Did you like the candy? Sorry, I didn't know. I'll go ask them for the plant." He comes up to us, in the other room, and asks why we moved the plant. We didn't tell him we moved the plant. No one else was around to tell him. How did he figure it out we did it? When I was around 9, we rescued a dog that we named Billy. Billy was a 90-pound pit bull mix. He was fiercely protective of me and my mom, and loved to sleep in bed with my parents. One night I woke up to commotion. My dad was downstairs and my mom was in the hallway. I quickly asked what was going on. My mom told me that my dad had feared someone was breaking in. He was a police sergeant and, after hearing a crash from the first floor of our house, he grabbed his sidearm and went downstairs. He came back up a few moments later looking really worried. He said the house was empty and no signs of forced entry or anything stolen, but all of the pictures on our mantle were face down and a few of the frames were shattered. He also said that Billy, normally the first to rush to defend the house, had sat on the stairs crying and growling and would not follow him down. We all settled back into bed slowly, but what started to worry me was that Billy came to sleep in my room. Now, like I said, he adored my mom. He always slept with my parents. But he laid on his belly by my legs that night and never put his head down. Just kept looking around. I finally drifted off to sleep only to be woken by him standing with his entire body covering mine, and growling the most ferocious growl I'd ever heard come from him. He was growling at the doorway but there was nothing there. I screamed for my parents and I'm not ashamed to admit that I slept in their room for the rest of that night and a few more after that. When I was about 15 my family bought a 200-year-old house in the middle of nowhere VA that actually had a slave quarters in the backyard. We kept the lawnmower and weed eater and all our yard care stuff there. The first night we stay in the house we come downstairs to find our front door wide open. My mother immediately claims the house is haunted and we're being told to leave. I roll my eyes and go back to my room. Then weird crap starts happening throughout the house. In my bedroom, my computer cuts on in the middle of the night. My radio cuts on. About once a week one of my electronic devices in my room would go nuts for seemingly no reason and it was legit unnerving. Things end up opened and closed at random for seemingly no reason. At first I suspect my little sister is playing some sort of joke but some of the windows and crap being moved are beyond her reach. And that doesn't explain the electronics going haywire. The worst scare I ever got was when my TV, which is in the room next to me, not my bedroom, cut on at like 3 a.m. one night and I happened to be watching MTV2 earlier in the day and, of course, the volume is up loud and they're playing some screamy Slipknot song or something and I wake up thrashing trying to get out of bed. My whole family comes upstairs because it disturbed them too. My mother decides we need to research the house. Turns out, our home is listed as a historic building and as such it has a ton of easily accessible history to it at the local library. Part of that history involves a priest who, for some unknown reason, hung himself in the room that ended up being my younger sister's bedroom. We never told her. Little Vietnamese lady who cuts my hair randomly tells me she believes in supernatural stuff and in an effort to entertain her I start telling her about the weird things going on in my house. She gives me a tiny statue of a little man and tells me to put it somewhere high up in my home. I put the statue way up on my tallest dresser, which is the highest elevated point inside the house that isn't the attic. All unexplained crap in my room and downstairs stops immediately, except there are occasional strange noises coming from the attic. We never go in the attic. I turn 18 and move out. Eventually my family moves out of the house. It probably simply got lost in the move, but when the time comes to move everything out, our little statue guy is nowhere to be found. I remember thinking, I hope the next family that lives there finds him, when my mom told me. Worked at a summer camp for a few summers at an all-boys program. We used radios to communicate. Now, I don't know much about radios, but these were not your everyday radios one buys at Walmart. We had a crazy radius, I'm talking miles. I could be at a hiking spot miles from camp and still be able to reach out. We are the only ones that ever use that frequency, and I don't think anyone could just hop in and talk/listen to us. One night, I woke up to static from my radio. You could make out someone saying something. This went on for a few minutes before the voice got easier to understand. I was dozing in and out of sleep with this sound on the background. My co-counselor woke me up asking me if I heard that from the radio. He quickly got down, grabbed the radio and turned on the lights. The kids in our bunk were waking up. Everyone sat on silence with the static on the background. What I heard next I'll never forget. This voice sounded like a young girl. "Help me, I'm stuck." I ran the radio to the office, where more counselors had already gathered. They had heard the same thing, and the static was still there. We woke up all of camp and did a head count and a radio count. Nothing out of the ordinary. We never know where it came from. Or who it was. The cops were called, but couldn't do much about it. I worked there a few more summers. And every once in a while I would wake up the static from my radio. Always freaks me out. In our old house, my father went downstairs one night to use the bathroom, I think around 2 a.m. In order to reach our bathroom you have to go through the living room, a kitchen, then the porch, then you reach the loo. It was a pain. My dad got to the bottom of the stairs and went to open the living room door, but could hear whispering. Like 2 or 3 hushed and rushed voices. But he couldn't make out what was being said. Straight away he thought burglars. So he grabbed a golf club that was in the hall and went to open the door. As he grabbed the door handle, it was red hot. It burned the shit out of his palm. He pushed the door open with his foot and the whispering stopped. Dead silence. My dad rinsed his hand under cold water, used the toilet and went back upstairs. He showed my mother the burn. She was woken up by him shouting. She vividly remembers seeing this huge ass pink burn. But the next morning? Completely gone. Not a single mark on his palm. Nothing. For years I thought maybe they were drunk or high on some shit. But it happened to me personally too. Almost the exact same situation. I was going downstairs to get some snacks. I was up playing on DBZ Budokai all night. It was about 2 a.m. As I approached the living room door, I could vividly hear whispering voices. Male and female tones, hushed rapid voices which sounded like arguing. I actually thought maybe my parents were still up. I opened the door and the silence dropped. Couldn't hear a thing. I tried to turn on the lights and all 3 bulbs in the ceiling fan popped and shattered glass everywhere. I fucking almost shit myself and I closed the door. I wasn't hungry anymore. Obligatory, I don't believe in this shit, but 12-ish years ago, on tour with my band. Stayed the night in somebody's house who was nice enough to take us in for the night after the show. Me and our bass player, Dave, in one room, our drummer, Ty, in another room right next to it. I woke up at like 1 and couldn't sleep. At about 2, Dave started talking to himself in his sleep. It didn't sound like him, but it was obviously him because nobody else was there, right? I ignored it at first, but it got annoying and was making it harder to fall asleep. So. Me, Dave. You're talking in your. Dave, huh? I'm wide awake. What are you talking about? I haven't been able to sleep. I've just been laying here for a while. I fucking swear I heard someone talking. Like, an entire conversation. It's not like I just woke up and was in some sort of weird half-dream state. I was awake for a while before this. It really freaked me out. Had to turn on the light and calm down a bit. We even went and got Ty because he was a few years older and I thought he might calm me down. Eventually went to sleep. The next morning, we get in the van and head to the next town. As we're pulling out of the driveway, Ty tells me that he didn't say anything last night because he didn't want to freak me out more, but when we woke him up, he saw something strange. When he went to bed, the door to the attic was in his room and it wouldn't stay shut. Just the way it was hung. He took a heavy space heater and put it in front of the door to keep it closed, and then he went to bed. When we woke him up, it had been moved and the attic door was wide open. Now I don't believe in ghosts or spiritual stuff, but this is probably the closest I'll ever be to a supernatural encounter. Just came back from a club, got dropped off by my mates. I was walking home, and needed a piss. I get to my house and speed up. I then realized that I didn't bring my key with me. I've lost stuff in clubs before, so wanted to be on the safe side. Side note, I was 17, living with parents. So I'm at my front door, need a piss, and no key. It's 11:30ish, so I'm not going to ring the doorbell because it will wake up my mom/sister. I aggressively knock the front door window. I know my dad will hear it. Side note, my front door window is not clear, it's got patterns over it so you can't make out a face, but can make out objects. Here's the creepy shit, through my window, I see a red figure, walk out of my back room, and open the door for me. I thought it was my dad, but when the door opened, literally no one was there. No one was behind the door, no one was in the corridor or anything. It was like my dad opened the door and disappeared. But then my dad comes out of the back room, wearing a white shirt. At that point I was creeped out, because I 100% don't have my key on me, and a red figure which magically disappeared let me into my own home. Creeps me out to this day, but this isn't made up, I promise. I've posted this in previous threads, but when a thread comes up where I can post it, I will take the opportunity if it means I may get some more opinions on the matter. I lived with my boyfriend and his parents for a while in high school. All kinds of creepy shit happened in that house, but by far the creepiest happened once when I was alone getting ready for work. I went to the basement to get my uniform out of the dryer. I looked up in time to see an empty rifle case swinging rapidly from a nail in the wooden rafter above. There wasn't any wine down there. I was creeped out enough by just that, but as my attention was on the rifle case, a heavy chain, think huge lengths, at least 30 or so pounds, scraped across the floor as if someone picked it up and gave it a big yank. I ran out of there so fast I could have won the gold at the Olympics. Another time, I was laying in bed half asleep and half awake. I could feel my leg sliding off the side of the bed, but was too asleep to stop it. All of a sudden my entire body was yanked off of my pillow. I'm talking a good 6 inches downward. I chalked it up to me being asleep until the next morning my BF mom said, "I had a dream a little boy was playing cowboys and Indians with you. He wrapped your leg in rope and yanked you off of your pillow." I had forgotten about being yanked until she said that, and sure enough when I looked down I had a red marks around my lower thigh that looked distinctly like rope burn. As a funeral director's son, I spent a lot of time wandering funeral homes. As a result, I'm rather numb to the whole haunted house shtick, and I'm not terribly bothered by bodies unless I knew them personally. I spent many a weekend playing my N64 in the office of the crematorium while my dad burned a few bodies for a spare shift. Anyway, point of the thread. Despite the abundance of death, my family and I only really had one encounter with the paranormal. I was maybe 7. Some knobhead had lost his keys, so my dad was called to lock up the building. We went with him with the idea of going to the movies afterwards. I'm wandering around, my dad's off checking lights and alarms and whatnot, and my mom is looking around the viewing rooms. She liked the picture collages they'd make of the deceased for the family to stand around and reminisce about. I hear my dad should all right, let's go. I meet them in the hallway connecting the main viewing rooms, near the entrance, and my mom asks, "Is anyone else here?" Employee's name might still be here, but I thought they had left as we arrived. Why? The employee whose name I forgot was a young woman. Well, I was in the main hall, and I saw an old man walk across the other end of the hall, from room 5 to 6. "Oh, that's Jerry. People see him sometime." Apparently this funeral home was haunted by an old man named Jerry. Not sure why the name, Dad says no one recognized him, was just a name they picked. He liked to stroll the halls, turn lights back on after they had locked up for the night, and flutter flowers without a breeze of wind. Dad said he must have been waiting around for us to leave so he could with the lights. My dad had just made sure we're off. My sister has a rare genetic disease that causes her pancreas to produce insulin like there's no tomorrow. To make long story short, it means she took a ton of medication and can just pass out, and it can cause serious brain damage if it's not treated ASAP when she passes out. It's like asphyxiation, 10 minutes and she's long gone. My mother came with her to school and sat at the teacher's room all day because she's the only one who knows how to treat this rare disease in my country, Israel, except my father and some doctor who is like 3-hour drive away. So I'm in 2nd grade, me and my sister are in the same school, she's 3rd grade. At lunch I sit with my friends, and suddenly I just feel something is wrong with her. I have no idea where she is, but I just start running as fast as I can to the library, which is like 300 meters away. I then find my sis at the library unconscious. My mother saw me running like a madman and came to see what's up. She came right after I arrived and treated her. I literally had no way of knowing that she passed out. It wasn't in line of sight or anything. It's not like I might have just started running randomly and happened to find her. I didn't finish my lunch, and I was, and still am, a fat ass. I didn't ever run unless I really had to. Nothing like this incident ever happened to me before or since. So yeah, I have no idea what happened there. I grew up on horror books and movies, and have been in numerous life or death situations. I don't scare easily, and know what fear is. In second grade we moved down the street maybe 5 minutes to a much larger house. It was cool. Big yard, big room, everything a kid wanted. Sadly, the basement wasn't finished. Not a huge deal as our previous basement was only half finished and would spend a lot of time down there. But I would not go into the new basement. I would freeze at the top of the steps and get this hollow feeling in my stomach. My parents told me I had an overactive imagination and laugh it off. Things start disappearing, nothing of any real significance. Parents shrug it off. Handprints start appearing on the first floor mirror, my younger sister and I get blamed for it every time. We can't physically reach the mirror, maybe the very bottom with help of a chair. Suddenly one day we wake to find all of our house keys are missing. After searching for about 2 days, we replace all the locks in our house. My mom was really spooked. The handprints appear again, and she realizes they keep appearing in the same spots, and are larger than her hands, so they can't buy mine or my sister's. After that, things seemed to quiet down. The basement no longer bothered me, and when I was in high school we finished it. I spent quite a bit of time down there gaming. Summer after graduation, my parents went on a month-long vacation, and my sister lived with some friends during that time, leaving me home alone. Fine by me. Not the first time I've spent the night alone, or even the weekend alone, by a long shot, but never this long of a time. It's late one night, and I was taking my dishes downstairs but all the lights were off. That's fine, I can get by without them. As soon as I stepped onto the top stair, that same feeling I used to get at the basement steps hit me again, more powerful than I remembered it. I stood there frozen for almost 15 minutes while something inside me screamed it is not safe to walk downstairs. I did not sleep that night. It's happened a few times since then as well, although I don't lose sleep over it. 2 summers ago the worst happened. I'll try to keep this short. I sleep in the pitch black, only way I can sleep. Dreaming about living in the place I work, weird. Dream is now driving around with friends, all is fine. Suddenly, some people are now skeletons, and there's blood everywhere and people are panicking. A deep voice keeps cutting through, I can't make it out but I know it's addressing me and is not a part of what's happening. I realize I'm in a dream and wake up, right into sleep paralysis, inside the first dream. There is a shadowy, elongated, humanoid shape standing over my body, and I try to wake up again. As I am now physically aware I am still dreaming but can feel my actual body. I wake up fully to my pitch black room, and see the same figure from my dream turn to look at me and then stand up as if startled, and sprint out through my doorway. I experienced true terror then. I was attacked by a lion in Africa, and was more coherent and less scared during that than after this encounter. I met with my pastor, and prayed through the rooms of the house. We've had no issues since. I have had a few unexplained, some may call supernatural experiences in my life but there are some that stand out to me the most. The first, was when I was 12. I wrote in my diary about my Uncle Bud dying and how I thought it would be so romantic if he died, and there was no reason to think he would, because my first boyfriend would hold me while I cried. I was an extremely sheltered and neglected child and I knew nothing of death or how real it was, if that makes sense. The next morning my father got a call that my uncle had died around the time of my diary entry. This scared the crap out of me and I felt guilty about it for years. However, it taught me about mindfulness and empathy and how even your own thoughts and actions can be very powerful even if it's as harmless a diary entry. At least that's how I see it. The second, was when I was about 15 to 16. I come from a family of painters and I was the only writer. I detested drawing or painting of any kind as I felt that it was forced upon me, mostly from my mother. One time, late at night, I asked for some paper and pencils and started feverishly drawing. I drew a portrait of Virginia Woolf, a girl called Nobody, and boy named Will, from a book I was working on, and a strange man that I entitled Missing. He had characteristics that I personally did not find particularly attractive, however, most people would. For instance, he had heavy brows, which I never favored, and his eye color was not what I preferred. Strangely, I painted him crying. My mother then asked me, "Why is he crying?" To which I replied, "I don't know, Mom. He's sad for some reason. He's missing someone." So fast forward a couple years and I walk into a grocery store, in a town that I just moved to temporarily, and there was this guy stocking shelves. I thought he was another tall guy, that I saw earlier in the week whilst shopping, that I found attractive, but it turned out he wasn't. It was the guy from my drawing a few years back entitled Missing. That meeting began a profound yet tumultuous romantic relationship that lasted 6.5 years. He later became one of the most influential persons of my life. It may make readers a bit uncomfortable, but that experience changed my life for the better and made me a better human being. Lastly, was the most bittersweet. My father passed away when I was 33, I am now 42, I am the youngest daughter of 3, but I was very much placed in the role of son opposed to the sensitive daughter that I was. My father became my closest confidant, my best friend, my worst critic. It was almost a marriage of sorts, and not in a sexual or romantic way. When he died of a massive heart attack, I was completely bereft. Of course, my dad, being my dad, left no will, but verbal instructions on what to do with his body. He refused to have a military funeral but preferred to have his ashes spread in a ballpark. My father adored baseball. Especially, the Detroit Tigers. The first plan was to sneak his ashes in Tiger Stadium. But they tore the original down, so we scrapped that idea. His instructions were to scatter them in any baseball field, so we found a beautiful park that was suitable. I had an idea to have a pickup game for the night we were to spread his ashes. As I came up to bat, I hit the ball, which is a miracle unto itself, and ran like hell. I had the distinct impression that someone was running after me. I kept giggling and laughing like crazy. I thought it was my brother-in-law or my new husband. It was like someone was chasing me as if to playing tag. I cried out, "Stop it! Stop it!" in a playful way and ran the bases till I got to home plate. I finally turned around to tag the person that was chasing me. No one was there. I looked around confused. I talked to my family and asked, "Hey guys, which one of you was chasing me?" They said, "No one. We were wondering why you were screaming like a madman, we thought a bee was chasing you." I struggle daily with the concept of a higher being. I have been baptized Catholic, practiced Wicca, converted to Judaism, mikveh, dabbled in Buddhism, and explored Islam. Suffice it to say, nothing has fit completely. I do not know what I am. But, I feel for some reason that my life has been touched in some way, I just don't know by what or whom. I'm about as rational and skeptical of the supernatural as they come. Nevertheless, I've experienced countless weird events that I tend to just dismiss since I have no way of reproducing them consistently, and when they do occur, even if they're witnessed, because they can't be reproduced, they create more of a holy shit that was weird type story for the day than a sudden belief in the supernatural. That's what these are, my holy shit that was weird stories. The first is that I've heard people's thoughts on 2 occasions that stand out clearly. The first time and the most recent time come to mind. When I say I heard them, it was like I hallucinated them speaking. I wasn't looking at them and yet responded to their thoughts at the time as if they said them out loud. I actually heard them speak with my ears, or it seemed like I did. Obviously everyone involved was surprised and confused. I've tried to think about any similarities among the times this has happened and haven't been able to really find a true X factor. I get the usual intuition where I know the answers to questions before I ask them and things like that, but these times were different because there was an actual sensory hallucination. The next is I've had enough dreams come true that it caused me to seriously consider why they were coming true. Obviously I have seemingly meaningless dreams mixed in, but there's a certain type of dream that when I have it, it feels more like I'm visiting a potential future on the timeline before waking up in the present. It's not that they're especially vivid dreams, in fact they're mundane, but there's details that are present that I notice and remember when I wake up. Then, when that actual scenario occurs, I'm like I've been here and seen this before. Like remembering the future. My best guesses of how these types of dreams happen is that in some cases the dreams themselves were guiding me to make them a reality on a subconscious level, and in others my brain was maybe just taking variables that I encounter in my daily life and simulating likely scenarios I might experience. In the latter case, if my brain simulates, let's say 20 scenarios in my dreams with minor details shifted around, it's likely that I'll inevitably come across a scenario that seems familiar. In one of the dreams though, I was stabbed with a big bore-looking spear on the left of my body, in the middle of my ribcage. The pain actually woke me up. To this day, 8 years later, I have a phantom pain there, a recent one and definitely memorable. The girl I'm dating now never had seizures before in her life. Coincidentally, she started having them a couple months after we started dating, scary as fuck in their own right. Just my luck. She got on medication, everything was good, then one night she had the mother of all seizures. I called 911 as usual, got her on her side and waited for her to come to. Well, the seizing stopped and so did everything else. This was different than the other times. To this day I swear this girl died. Her tongue had that lifeless hang to it, her eyes were staring vacantly into nothing, her whole complexion was ghostly. Blue lips and the like are common when someone has a seizure, that wasn't this. I'm shouting her name, stunned, shaking her. This was about 20 to 30 seconds, maybe longer. At this point I'm looking at her and I stand up, put my hands on my head and I'm like, oh no, holy fuck, oh no. Then in my head I had this moment of clarity. It was like time stopped. Like I got sucked out of my body and went to this quiet, dark, cosmic place. I thought this girl is 22 years old, she's been pretty sheltered her whole life, she's lived a good, simple life, she's finally starting to enjoy life and see the bigger world and she goes out like this. Too cliché pointless. One last time I called her name, shoved her, and boom, she jolted back to life screaming. Everything came back to life, but she wasn't herself. She didn't seem aware of anything and I obviously first thought, oh no, she has brain damage. The paramedics and her parents arrived and we couldn't calm her down or communicate with her. What sticks out in my mind was the one paramedic saying this isn't a seizure. They brought her to the hospital in critical condition. I followed behind and by the time I got there, she was seemingly coming to. She later told me that she didn't recall screaming at all. She remembers seeing everyone in the room and trying to call out to us, but we weren't responding and it didn't seem like we could hear her. There's more to it, but I'm basically just typing this upstream of consciousness as I remember it. The next couple of days, I would wake up in the middle of the night or simply not be able to sleep, and I would go for drives trying to figure out what the fuck had happened that night. It still sticks with me, but for at least a month after I was really shaken up by the whole thing. To make matters more bizarre, myself and her friends noticed a distinct change in her personality and mannerisms, like she came back as a different person. Not in a bad way, but definitely different. She grew her hair out, dyed it, started cursing more, seemed to get sharper in her senses / less naive, her sense of humor was different, she started dressing differently. I jokingly started referring to her as Beric Dondarrion. She seems better now and hasn't had a seizure since, but that night definitely changed me as well and I'll likely never forget it, for better or worse. Growing up in a really old house we had lots of weird things happen. My family still talks about the spirits or whatever they were, but they mostly seem to have calmed down as we renovated more and more of the house. Kind of like they felt it was less and less their place to be still, I think. Never menacing things, just odd, but terrifying sometimes. Benign things like the dryer turning on, which mom actually called her helper spirit cause our machine was kind of old and sometimes had to be ran twice to get things dry. Two instances always stand out to me that I'll never forget though. One time I was playing in my room, nothing unusual at all. We had this cheap fake wood shelf that had books and toys and knickknacks all over it. I was playing somewhat in front of it when it exploded. I don't mean that like a bomb, but I don't know how else to explain it. Everything just started coming flying off the shelves and flying everywhere. Oddly enough, not a single thing hit me. I remember being mad at my parents after they heard the noise and came to see what happened. They didn't believe me and just told me to clean it up. Second story happened to my brothers as well. It's a weird shared experience that was ongoing. Oftentimes we'd see shadow people in the house. Sometimes together, but one seemed to visit me quite often when I had a bedroom in the room that seemed to be the most active or whatever. We all shared that room for some time and had different stories. There always appeared to be a shadow man standing in the doorway watching me. No features or anything, just a dark outline of a man. Sometimes if I closed my eyes and opened them again it would be closer. Some nights I would just sit there and stare. He never moved while I was watching. It's giving me shivers now just thinking about it again. I'd stare for what seemed like hours until I must have finally passed out. Looking for any imperfections to let me know if it was just a shadow or my mind playing tricks. And because I didn't want it to come closer, I only ever closed and opened my eyes enough times to have it near the edge of the bed once. I remember being scared and screaming for my parents often, but I'm not sure I really felt threatened ever, just cold. But that could be from crappy windows in a 100-year-old house too. Anyway, I remember when we finally got around to renovating that room, we ripped up the carpet and underlay to find shitty black and white linoleum tile stuff. Near the door off to the side was this weird human-sized stain. It wasn't unusual finding water damage and stuff when we were doing renos, and I hadn't seen or even thought about the shadow man for a very long time when we ripped up that floor. Instantly I knew that was something, but it's weird because it didn't feel like I thought of it. It just seemed like I was told that as soon as I saw it. I have had weird experiences my whole life. Here's a couple that stick out. When I was a kid, there was a night when I wasn't feeling well, And I woke up to an old woman in a blue dress pulling my covers up and stroking my hair. For some reason, I didn't feel scared or anything. I asked my mom the next day about it, and she found a picture of my great-grandmother, long deceased, in the blue dress that she was buried in. It was definitely her. I used to live in a foreign country that had experienced a lot of war and violence, especially against indigenous people, and I knew my apartment was haunted. Regularly at night, empty water bottles would be tossed around my bedroom, the lights would go on in the middle of the night, footsteps walking, doors shutting, etc. One night it got really creepy when I felt a large weight depress the end of the bed, like a person sitting. I went to the local market to get some sage or something, and the woman who sold charms would sell any to me, saying I was cursed to walk among them. Ended up moving a couple weeks later and it stopped. I moved into an apartment about 5 years ago with my boyfriend, which also had unusual activity. One night, I was home alone and on the phone with my best friend. All of a sudden, the TV turned on max volume, scaring the crap out of me. I screamed, turned off the TV, and was explaining to my friend what had happened when across the apartment, both the bedroom and bathroom doors slammed shut. It was winter, there were no windows open. I immediately left the house and returned the next day. A ton of other stuff happened there, I can get into it if anyone is interested, but we did a little ghost hunting once we left, and the apartment was empty of furniture. We got responses, and I have them recorded. UFO stuff. I grew up in the outskirts of Oregon, deep in Clatsop County on the logging roads. Out in this part of the land you do not suffer from light pollution. On a clear night you can really take in the cosmos. As a family we would spend nights outside on our house's rooftop and stargaze, shooting stars, satellites and pointing out constellations. My stepfather would have my brother and I go back inside when the satellites would start to dance. Now we had to been around 7 to 13 years old at the time and never really understood what he meant by that. As I grew older and more rebellious I would sneak out at night and wait for these satellites to start dancing, with no avail. Skip ahead a little bit. When I was 10 years old I witnessed a plane flying overhead a hill that our house overlooked. Thinking it was strange I asked my stepdad, should there be a plane out here? His response was no, there is never any air traffic over here, the airport is more in the city, so I kept watching, curious about what this plane was doing out here. After a few seconds of watching it seemed to just stop. Once again I asked my stepdad, should a plane just stop in the air? He once again gave me a quick response, no, planes can't just stop mid-air, and it was left at that. I stayed watching this plane sit there for what seemed about 15 seconds and then the light just vanished. A week later my older brother left to do some camping with friends. On the second night something really terrifying happened. I used to sleep in a sleeping bag, not anymore. I went to sleep in my PJs and zipped up in my sleeping bag, warm and tight. Now understand this. My mother was working at a military surplus store at the time and had gotten me this sleeping bag. It was one of those ones that come all the way up to the head and cover it like a hoodie. Anyway. At some point during the night I woke up in an absolute panic and sweat. I felt dizzy and disoriented. Without being able to see I started to thrash around. Finding a wall I started pounding on it as hard as I could until my mother came down and unzipped the bag. I was upside down in my bag, naked, covered in sweat and freezing cold. She told me that my brother must have done it and then quickly remembered that he was away camping and then tried to say I did it myself, but I know it's impossible to undress myself in that bag and also place myself upside down in my own bag with it fully zipped up. I never sleep in sleeping bags till this day. Skip ahead even farther, I am now 22 years old and living in Beaverton, Oregon. This is a warm, clear summer day in August and my friends and I are standing outside while they smoke and I get some sun. The area that we were hanging out at was in a semi-industrial area where a lot of big rig trucks would drive through. This is important because we all knew what it felt like when once of these 18-wheelers would drive by and we kind of made a game out of guessing when they would come or go. I started to feel the ground shake and could hear it coming. I was wrong. The clear blue sky formed a sort of clouded and that cloud opened and giant fireball came flying down out of it. Judging by the size and speed of it I thought my friends and I were about to die. I seriously thought that it was the end of Portland/Beaverton as I knew it. I turned to my friends and said, we are about to die. People across from us at the Max stop started pointing and yelling. The owner of the building dropped his cigarette and just stood in awe. As this now roaring fireball flew towards the ground we could now feel the heat. The air had pressure and the ground was really starting to shake, maybe my legs too, and then all of a sudden it performed a 180-degree rapid turn and shot back up into the sky faster than it was falling and completely vanished. My friend turned to me and said that was a weird firework. We argued for a good 3 hours about it until I gave up and drove home, phoning my dad on the way home asking him to turn on the news because something groundbreaking just happened and I told him everything. I got home and Nothing, no news was covering it, internet had nothing on it, and that was that. It was over. Till this day I have no idea what happens or what I saw. So 10 years ago I was in a shared living situation, not a hippie thing, or a frat thing, it's just where life landed me, and I shared a large bedroom in a huge older home in the Pacific Northwest. If anyone's been out there, it's one of the woodsy modernism houses built in the 60s/70s. You're from the PNW, we all know the type I'm talking about. Anyways, I had a computer on my side of the room, as after getting off work I would come home usually about before my literal roommate, the dude I literally shared a single room with, and his jump on the web and watch adult entertainment. Anyways, not a lot of privacy in a shared room, so I had to make the most of my private time. One day though I came home especially early. After taking care of business I began to look up scary videos. At this time in my life I had developed a strange fascination with all things terrifying. I read Jay's journal, a bunch of older Stephen King. I would go to the local obscure video rental shop and check out foreign horror films, underground shit. Dark. Scary. I don't know why. So this particular day I found myself ping-ponging through a shit ton of clickbait, different sites, etc., ghost videos, unexplained phenomena, demons on tape, etc. Well, I must have watched about 50 of the startle scare videos and 100 ghost videos, most of which were clearly staged, some done better than others. Then I came across one video. It said, "How to summon the devil" or something. I was curious, so I picked it. It started out with a classic black screen with white letters, explaining that for this video to work I should stare at the screen and not look away, put in headphones, try not blink, blah blah blah, it works. So I did. I was expecting it to be a jump scare video at the end, so I was a little anxious watching it. But it wasn't. It was a bunch of random, albeit clearly satanic, symbols, pictures and images flashing on the screen in rapid succession. They too were a simple black and white. A goat's head, I think, a Baphomet, some Hebrew letters, etc. All the while I heard this strange sounding noise and the headphones sounded like an old recording being spun backwards. It was over in less than maybe 2 minutes, and concluded with more script on the screen explaining I had just watched a spell video. The images were part of the casting and the noise was the Lord's Prayer backwards. Then it said something like "Sleep with one eye open tonight, for his advocate, or assistant or something like that, is now with you." Then it said, "You'll see what we mean." Lame. That's all I thought. In fact, my roommate got home and asked what I was doing. So I told him I'm looking up scary videos. He said, "I don't know why you're so into that bullshit. You know it's all fake," or something on those lines. I said, "Yeah, I know, just think it's fun or whatever." So I want to make it clear that of the hours of videos I watched that day, this one was the least exceptional. In fact, as I looked through more videos I forgot about that one. Truly I did. I went out to dinner with this girl I had actual on and got into bed around 11 o'clock. Pretty typical night for a 20-year-old dude who worked on cars for a living. Nothing unusual or out of the ordinary. No Ouija boards, no tarot cards, none of that typical spooky shit happened. So fast forward, I go to bed. I had an old twin mattress I had used in high school and it was up against the opposite wall of my roomie's queen mattress. Dave, my roomie, was a loud snorer and would sometimes wake me up, but I had gotten pretty used to it. Anyways, I woke up from a dreamless sleep, laying on my stomach in bed, but I was wide awake. I thought it was strange, as I looked at my alarm clock next to the bed, the numbers 313 glowing at me. I remember that vividly. I also remember glancing over at Dave laying there and hearing his snoring. I wasn't scared or frightened or anything. I was just annoyed I had woken up when I had to be up for work in like 2 hours. I had only barely lifted my head from the pillow to glance at Dave and I plopped it back down to try to go back to sleep. Here's where shit got weird. So my comforter wasn't tucked in on one side of the bed, the side that was pushed against the wall. Sometimes T would kinda slide a bit if too much fell off the side, you know. Well, my comforter started to slide off of me, so, with my eyes still closed, I tried to grab it with my hand to yank it back into place before it fell off my body. That's when it hit me. I went from no fear to pure, uncut, fear in less than heartbeat. I just got chills writing this. It wasn't sliding, it was being pulled. I'm not fucking joking. Fucking pulled. My skin got shivers all over and all my hair stood on end as I froze. No sooner had I realized the blanket was being pulled than something grabbed my feet and pulled me to the end of my bed. I grabbed my mattress and clenched my teeth and eyes only to be instantly released. I opened my eyes and the clock read 3:14. Dates snoring remained unbroken and steady, but I was in the original position I had awoken in, my comforter on me like nothing happened. I'm no genius, but I am rational. The first thought as my chills subsided were of the How to Summon Satan video. I don't know why. It's like I just knew it was connected. My next more rational thought was, that was just a nightmare, dude. And despite feeling a very negative energy in the room, I brushed it off. I talked myself out of the experience. So I tried to go back to sleep even though I was pretty shaken and half tempted to wake up Dave. But what could I say? We were both blue-collar workers, he did concrete construction for Christ's sake. What do I tell a guy who lost 2 fingers at work and his front tooth in a fist fight? Hey man, I had a super scary dream, can you make me feel better? Boo fucking who? No way. So I tossed and turned for what felt like an hour and was pretty sure I wasn't sleeping again. But I did. I awoke, again on my stomach to the sound of Dave snoring. No sooner did I open my eyes than my comforter started to slide. I knew what was coming next. I grabbed both sides of my mattress and grinded my teeth so hard I chipped one as something now grabbed me by shoulders, picked me up and slammed me down on the bed so hard my nose started bleeding. The crash was so loud Dave woke up and rolled over. What the fuck are you doing? He asked, annoyed and angry. I broke down. I told him about the video about the previous experience and asked if he would pray with me. I'm not religious, but I was legitimately terrified. He stopped me mid-prayer and asked if I felt that. As he said, do you feel all? Both our hairs stood on end and we got the chills. Nightmare chills. We all know them. And then he said, I don't know what you did, but I want no part of it. He took his pillow and blanket and left me there, alone. I don't know why I didn't leave too. The room was huge and dark and cold and I was just too scared to leave, or even move, I guess. I didn't sleep until dawn, and for the next couple weeks I felt plagued by waves of fear and panic attacks. It finally began to subside a month later. It felt like I was being watched all the time, and paranoid cost me a relationship with girl I liked. SC said I got weird and was always negative. That was 10 years ago. The following 7 years light recount the story to friends or whatever. When Paranormal Activity came out and blanket was pulled off the girl, I told my date about it, but it went from a real event to a memory. I rationalized it away as a night terror. Until 3 years ago I met a guy at an outdoor concert. No one I went with knew this story. So it's late and everyone is exchanging ghost stories. All of a sudden this kid starts shaking and begins to tell a story about how him and a friend had seen a video one night. He proceeds to describe the same video, black and white imagery, the Lord's Prayer backwards, and then he says what really caught my attention, and now my hairs are on end along with his voice is trembling as he tells us that at 3:13 in the morning he and his friend are playing video games when the doorknob to the room there and begins to turn. They both freeze and get mad crazy chills. As the door slowly opens they see a large, very large, too tall to fit in the doorway shadowy figure bending down looking in at them with a glowing red eye. Yep. Nightmare fuel. Everyone begins to laugh at him and tease him. Red eye? They all say if only demons weren't so Hollywood cliche, my girlfriend says to me. She didn't know the story of what had happened to me 7 years prior. That's when she priced I was sweating and my hairs were on end. She tried to whisper if I was okay, and to reassure me it was only a story. No. I said. It isn't. I looked at this kid, and all I said was, I believe you. Since seeing that video I struggled with harmful self-destructive behaviors. Addiction, deception, loneliness. Can't hold a job. It's gotten a lot better, but for this kid, and here's where it gets weirder still. He was arrested for murder a year after telling us that story. So if anyone has seen or experienced something like this, please let me know. I'm not crazy or unbalanced. That kid convinced me that, whatever it was something. Was it a subliminal message that made us both go nuts? I don't know, but that's my unexplainable story. Thanks for reading, and if you've seen it, please let me know your experiences. Okay, so, does anyone here remember the ghost in a jar eBay phenomenal that got bid for over $1 million? Well, the person who originally put it up is my grandpa, and here's the story if anyone is intrigued. And before I begin, I know people won't believe me, we've gone through that our whole lives, so we're used to it. So, back in the 90s, in the Mid-South, when I was just a baby, my grandpa liked to go exploring out in the woods with his metal detector, and this wasn't one of those fancy metal detectors either, this was those old-timer ones that beeped when it picked up a signal. Anyways, while walking through the forest, he came across an abandoned cemetery. Grass had all grown over it and everything. Weird, but not even the worst part. He took some photos, and went on his merry way. Not too far from the cemetery, his metal detector picked up a signal, and so like any normal human being, he dug it up. What he found was a decayed wooden box, and inside was 2 jars, and a journal. I don't really know what happened next, all I know is he took the box with him, and started heading back home. Well, on his way back, he dropped one of the jars, and a black mist type substance came out and dissipated, I know it sounds made up like a supernatural episode, but trust me, it's real. So, afterwards, he started to feel strange about what happened, but continued on home anyways with the journal and other jar. Well, when he got home, later that night he started experiencing things. Shadows in the corner of his eye. He started to hear weird things, like a group of bees at his window or bedside, that were never there before. Well, anyways, this had continued on for a while, until he got used to it, oddly enough. Even my grandma, his wife, moved next door into their shop, because she was so freaked out. Anyways, while staying the night, I was lying down on the couch, pretty tired, and watching TV. Grandpa was next to me on the recliner sleeping away. Out of the corner of my eye though, I noticed something, and I looked and I swear I saw a face, staring right dead at me. Who knows, maybe it could have been my imagination, but I do believe it had something to do with what was happening in his house, and so I covered my face for a few seconds under the blanket, shaking like crazy, and I peeked out of the corner, and it was gone. And they lived pretty far out, and only had one neighbor really, but they would never do something like that. That was my first and last time I had ever seen it, and my entire families who stayed over there have seen it at least once, if not multiple times. And in conclusion, I can no longer look out open windows at night, because I think I'm going to see it again. They eventually moved, by the way, and the sightings stopped pretty much. And by the way, for anyone wondering, yes, he still has the other jar, and the journal, but they're decayed pretty badly, so who knows if the other jar will ever burst.